Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna make a princess dress out of this beautiful night sky fabric that I have right here. I am super excited to turn this into a dress, and without further ado, let's get started. I already went ahead and prepped my pattern pieces. I added interlining and interfacing to my pattern pieces, so I have 3 layers right here. The sheer starry night kind of fabric, then a backing fabric so that you don't have a see-through fabric, obviously, in a teal kind of tone. I have interfacing on that fabric as well, and then I have interlining, which is the yellow fabric right here, which is just a denim. The color does not matter, which also has interfacing on the inside, and then I also added the interfacing with a stay stitch around all the pattern pieces. All of them have the same layers basically to make the bodice super sturdy and, you know, keep its shape and prevent any wrinkling or whatever. We want a smooth surface like that. So that is all the prep work that I did. I basted all of the layers together with a basting stitch into the seam allowance, and with all of that done, we can get started. So the first thing that I want to do is to start from the front. I have my center front piece right here, and I'm gonna take out my middle front pieces, so one like this, and then on the other side the same obviously, and my side front. And I'm gonna start with the front lining seam right here because this is a rather simple line and we can, you know, iron everything flat before we continue on with the curved area right here in the front area. So let's put right sides together of middle front and side front. You're gonna find a notch up here that marks the stitching line. You can see it right here. I like to, and you can do that with some markings as well, I use my interfacing tape with a stay stitch here because this is 1 centimeter, so I know my stitching line is right here. I measure in 1 centimeter from all sides, and that's the point that gets matched up together with the height of my notch right here. So I also go 1 centimeter in like this. And that is the point that needs to get matched up with the middle front. And then I'm just simply going to match up the rest of the distance like that. I'm gonna sew from the waistline all the way up to that point right here, and we have the first seam down. And now with that done, we're gonna iron the seam allowance open, and I also want to cut towards the stitching line right here at the notch area. So I'm just gonna take my side front piece and cut towards the stitching line like so. So once I iron this open, this can lay flat. And up here, there is now a lot of bulk, which I want to get rid of. So I'm just gonna cut towards the stitching line like so. And then I just have a little bit less bulk right here. And I also decided to add boning to my seams. I'm just going to use the seam allowance that I already have as boning channel and see how it goes. I realized to, you know, do a teeny tiny bit of a wider boning channel because I had a lot of problems inserting the boning to the back piece that I already finished right here as a tryout. This was really hard. So I'm going to make it a teeny tiny bit wider. And I think I'm not going to go all the way up, maybe to somewhere here. Minus seam allowance around 12 centimeters. I added 2 centimeter seam allowance here at my waist area just to make it a teeny tiny bit easier for me to work with the waist seam once it's time. So I'm gonna go up until here, which is 12 centimeters, and do once up, over and down. And now, once I'm done with that, I'm gonna measure 2.5 centimeters because I have 2 centimeter seam allowance and I wanna give the boning a teeny tiny bit room so that it's not gonna interfere with my waist seam in the end. So I have this, and then I'm gonna round the upper area. This should be fine. I'm gonna cut another piece that's the same. And now I'm gonna insert both pieces with one curving in one direction and the other one in the other direction so that the boning straightens out the seam. Okay, that's working out way better than with the other seams, so that's the way to go. And now with that in place, I'm gonna go ahead and add the center front to this seam right here. So I'm just gonna put right sides together again. Now here we have a few more notches that we need to match up, so let's go ahead and match up the stitching line of the waist seam, and then up here these need to match up. We're gonna find a bust notch, and then up here the stitching line needs to match up. And all the in-between, of course, also has to match up. I see right here that I need to open up the seam allowance a teeny tiny bit so that it fits together with the center front piece, as the curves are opposites. So like this, and then it fits together as well. And now we can sew this seam together as well. So for me, for ironing, I like to cut towards the stitching line in the bust area because it's super curvy, and otherwise we're just simply not going to be able to iron it open. And now let's start with the straighter seam down here. This is also where I'm going to add boning, not in the bust area, just below that. And then I'm going to iron the rest open as well. Very curved tailless hem, so I can put this over top here, somewhere where it fits. Okay, that's what it looks like, and I'm gonna add boning until my bust notch or under bust notch, which is somewhere right here, should be at around 10 centimeters for me, maybe 10.5. It depends, just check your pattern. I'm gonna go up until here. And that's what that looks like. I already inserted the boning, so that is one half of the front done. So let's repeat the same for the other half. So now with the front done, I want to do the volant part at the neck area. And for that, the first thing that you want to do is put the center front together right here. So put right sides together and close the seam right here. And I want to go ahead and cut the seam allowance down to 5 millimeters because this is see-through and I don't want to, do an overlock seam or anything like that to finish it. So I'm just gonna iron it open like this with a short seam allowance like that. And now I want to go ahead and finish the edge that will be laying raw, not really raw, but the lower edge, this edge right here. And I'm gonna do that with the zigzag stitch that I tried in my making of, where I tested all of the things that needed to be tested, which was also the finishing of the raw edge right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the zigzag right here off camera. Okay, that is what it looks like with the edge now finished. And I also did the same for the two back pieces so that that's also prepped already. So let's go ahead and put the volant onto our front piece. So I'm just gonna put it with all of the right sides facing up like this and pinning it onto the front piece. There should be notches for all of the dividing seams. And essentially I'm just gonna baste the two layers on top like this, and they're gonna get, cleaned up with the lining and everything then. So that is the front piece completely finished. I also added this small top stitch down the center front so that the volant is fixed in place right here. Let's go ahead and finish the back piece. So that's simple enough. You just have the back dividing seam that you're gonna close by putting right sides together. You probably have to cut towards the stitching line here in the round area so that you can manage to match both of these up. There is the notch right here that you want to match up with the one in the back piece. And then down here you're just going to match up the rest of the section and close that seam, iron it open, and then we can also baste the volant onto this area as well. So same thing as for the front piece, and then the back is also done. I am adding boning all the way up 23 centimeters without seam allowance. So right until here, I'm gonna add my boning channel. Okay, so with all of that now done, we can go ahead and close the shoulder seams up here, and then we're also going to close the side seams down here. So we're going to put the sleeve in at the very end, because lining and shell fabric will be used as one layer in the sleeve, since we have transparent sleeves, no lining in there. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. I added boning to my side seams as well, therefore I ironed the seam allowance open like that. And I'm also going to do that for the shoulder seams. And now the shell is almost done for the bodice, except for the sleeves, but we're going to do that at the very end. So we can recreate this whole piece, minus the volant obviously, in the lining fabric as well, which I already prepared. I just have to close the side seams as well. And I also added some padding right here, so that once this is in place, it's going to be nice and secure. And with all of that prepped, we can go ahead and start working on the skirt. So for the skirt, we have 3 pieces. Actually, we have 4 pieces. We have a big front piece that you need to cut in 1/4 and 3/4 basically. And then we have 2/4 of a circle. So all in all, if you put everything together, it's going to be 1 full circle skirt, which will be gathered in the waist. So it's going to be a gathered circle skirt. Therefore, a lot of poof. So we have the 2 back pieces, which, as I said, are just 2/4. And then we have the big front panel that needs to have the slit on either leg. I chose the left leg. So I have this big half circle that I then quartered so that I know exactly where my slit is, because my slit is going to sit on 1/4 of the front piece, so on 1/8 of the full circle basically. And then I used my template that you can find in my pattern pieces to create the round slit area that is right here. So I basically just cut that out, creating 2 pieces for the front with this big slit right here. So that is the front piece. So let's put the circle together. Basically, we're just gonna put all of the side seams together and that's it. And then I'm gonna take one of the 2 back pieces and put it right sides together and close that seam, and I'm also going to overlock that seam. And then obviously I'm going to repeat the same for the other back, which goes together with that smaller front piece that's going to sit on the other side of the slit. And then after I overlock everything, I'm gonna iron the seam allowance towards the back side. And I actually managed to do like this teeny tiny overlock seam, which I thought would be prettier for a translucent fabric. That is actually the rolled hem option on my sewing machine, with just a bigger distance between the stitches. So usually I would do a distance of 1, but here I did a distance of 2 per stitch. So that makes this really cute teeny tiny stitch. And now we can go ahead and prep the hem ruffles, which is just loads of panels, essentially, 8 to be exact. And I'm just gonna put right sides together of all of the panels and sew them together, and then also overlock the edges, just as I did for the skirt, to have a pretty and neat finish. When I have this very long, it's about 10 meters long panel, I'm also gonna go ahead and do a rolled hem at one of the sides of the hem ruffle, so that everything is already prepped and we can go ahead and gather the other side to fit the hem of our skirt. So I'm basically just gonna do all of the vertical seams to make a large panel, and then I'm gonna do this one very long rolled hem to finish one side. Okay, the hem ruffles are all finished. You can see right here, it looks really pretty. And now I'm gonna try to also gather these with my overlock machine so that I can do 2 in 1. And let's see how it goes. I have never gathered with my overlock machine before. I know technically how it works, but I also have to kind of rethread my machine, or I'll use the other one. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. Maybe I'm just gonna do a normal gathering stitch, but essentially you need to gather all of this, hence why I'm eyeing towards the fastest method, which would be the overlock machine, to fit the size of the skirt hem. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, I was able to gather with my serger, which was really quick and really easy. I just made the tension of that one thread, which goes along, very tight so that it gathers while it's overlocking. Really, really easy. So now, with that done, it's time to pin that onto the skirt. And since we have 8 panels, it should be fairly easy. We have the slit obviously, but apart from that, it should be fairly easy to match these two up and then gather these sections however much they need to be gathered, or, you know, take out gathers if need be. Let's take our skirt, and I'm gonna start with the big one from the center back, and 2 of each panel needs to fit along the hem of 1/4 of the skirt. So I'm just gonna lay out my back piece right here so that I have the center back, which is right here, and then also I can access the side seam, which is right here. And then I added a notch in the center of that skirt. You can just put these together like that, and then you have the center, and you need to mark that as well because that is one seam in the panel essentially. And we need to fit this and until here, which goes right here. So I know that the seam of the panel needs to sit in the center, which I marked with the notch of the back panel, and then the other end needs to sit at the hem. And I can see that the ruffles are too much. I gathered it up too much, so I can just adjust the gathers like so and match these up that way. And I'm gonna go through my hemline like that until I reach the front slit. Okay, now I have my big front slit, and what I'm gonna do is also determine the center of that slit, which I'm just gonna, you know, fold this right there and approximate the center, mark it with a notch, and then basically do the same thing. I wanna match up the next seam with that marked notch right here, and then the upper edge with the next seam, so that I distribute all of the ruffles as equal as I can. And it's not bad at all to have a tiny bit more ruffling in the front, because you obviously want to cover that area. It is a waist high slit, so there need to be enough ruffles to, you know, cover everything. And the next section is gonna be up until the waistline right there. And I have 2 centimeters seam allowance here, so I wanna have my seam at 2 centimeters lower than that. And then from there on, I'm just gonna put the other panel on this area here and just continue pinning. I'll show you as well in a second. Let me just pin this on here as well. Right here at the waistline, I want to cut towards the stitching line because all of this is seam allowance. So I want to flip that over and put it away so that I'm not going to stitch over it. And then I have my the front piece where I'm gonna do exactly the same. Gonna cut towards the stitching line at the waistline and just fold the seam allowance out of the way. And now, once I put these next to each other, you can also add pins onto this section here where they overlap so that these are a bit more stabilized and stay together like that. Like so. I can just continue pinning my ruffles until I reach the center of the other side. So with all of these ruffles now pinned in place, I'm gonna go ahead and put the hem ruffles onto the circle skirt, and I'm just gonna use my straight stitch machine for that. And once done with that, I might go over the whole hem with a small, teeny tiny rolled hem finish. you know, just as I did for everything else here, because I think it looks really nice and I might want to do that as well. I'm not sure about that because obviously the bigger finish here for the serging edge here also is security, whereas this is the hem. If you step on the hem, you might rip it out. So I'm not sure, maybe I'm just gonna leave it at that, but for sure I'm gonna put it on now. So let's get over and start sewing. Okay, that took a while, but my skirt is now completed. This is what the slit looks like. So I'm very pleased with how all of this worked out. A lot of ruffles right here. And then we have this spot up here that marks the waistline. So the 2 centimeters here are the seam allowance. So we're just gonna sew right here. But now we have to gather the waist to fit the waist of our bodice. So I'm gonna go ahead and run a gathering stitch along the whole inner circle perimeter right here and gather it to the size of my bodice. Okay, so I have my gathering stitch in place now. I have not gathered yet because I want to have my bodice ready and put it right sides on top once I have gathered everything down enough. So I marked my center front, it's right here, and I always do it the same way. So I'm also gonna mark my center front for my bodice right there, and then I'm just gonna take my bobbin thread off the gathering stitch and pull it until my skirt is the same length as my bodice. So this has to gather a whole bunch because I have double the amount in the circle skirt that I have in the waistline of your bodice. So we have a very big and fluffy skirt, which is super nice. Okay, with all of that in place, I'm gonna steam along the ruffles right here one last time. And now I should be able to pin those together a bit easier than before. Okay. With everything now pinned in place, I'm gonna sew the waistline. For the lining, I'm gonna do exactly the same. I'm not gonna put the slit in. I'm just gonna use a full circle skirt, gather it to fit the waistline of my lining, and then put it all together because I feel like it's gonna be also cute if the lining kinda blitzes out. So I'm thinking I'm gonna do that. I finished the lining as well, the hem, with a rolled hem, and therefore I think it's pretty enough that it could be visible as well. I also used this really, really beautiful satin. So let's gather the waistline and put the lining together as well. Okay, lining is done, shell is done, so we can go ahead and put these 2 layers together. And I'm gonna do that by just putting right sides together, and I'm gonna close the complete neckline, front and back neckline for now. So I'm just gonna put all of the notches together, starting from the center front, and then I'm just gonna work my way around the whole piece. And you're gonna find that your lining is a teeny tiny bit smaller than your shell. That is because you wanna iron the ditch of the seam at the very end towards the lining side. So you need a little bit less lining area, I guess, than the shell. So that's usual. You just need to ease both pieces together and match all of the notches and all of the seams up. And right here at the corner of the neckline, I want to be super careful to not sew a fold into my volant. Okay, and with all of that done, I'm gonna sew the neckline, and then I'm also gonna understitch the seam. Okay, everything is now attached and understitched. So let's go ahead and cut towards all of the seams where it's necessary to be able to turn everything right sides out. So you definitely need to cut towards the stitching line right here in the corner. We already did that for the shell, but I also want to do that for the lining, of course. And then I'm just gonna cut the seam allowance a teeny tiny bit back so that it doesn't bulk up on the inside. I also need to cut towards the stitching line here in the center front. Same reason. And I'm also gonna cut it down to prevent any bulk. And then I also want to cut towards the stitching line here in the back neck area. And now I should be able to turn everything right sides out. And I want to be super careful with ironing because I have the volant at the other side, so I don't want to flatten that too much. So I'm trying to just iron with my tip of the iron and go around this area super carefully. And I'm going to try to iron everything so that the ditch of the seam only is visible on the lining side as per usual. So like that, I think that should be fine. And I'm just going to go around the whole thing and iron everything accordingly. Okay, now I'm done with ironing the neckline, and I also went around the arm's eyes to, match up the shell with the lining right there, because we're gonna baste everything together now. As for the sleeves, we're gonna use this as one layer essentially. So I just went around everything and made sure that it all lines up. And now we can go around the arm's eye just with a basting stitch into the seam allowance. Okay, so with everything in place now, we can continue and make our sleeves, which are right here. I already went ahead and did a rolled hem seam right here. And now what we need to do is basically attach an elastic 3 centimeters higher than the hemline to get like a really cute hem here with a little bit of ruffle. And then we also need to gather the sleeve head to fit the arm's eye in the bodice, and then we can sew everything together. So let's get some elastic. I'm gonna use some black elastic for this project, as I think white would be pretty visible. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my upper arm measurement with the elastic. So I'm gonna stretch it until it sits tightly but comfortably. And I'm gonna cut 2 of these lengths like that, and basically now I'm just gonna stretch till it reaches the full length of the hem, and I'm gonna sew this at 3 centimeters. Okay, with that now done, let's add a gathering stitch into the sleeve cap, and you want to gather from the front sleeve notch, which is right here, all the way over the shoulder notch up until the princess seam notch right here in the back. So add a gathering stitch from here to here. I'm gonna do 2 sets of gathering stitches because I just like the ruffles that it creates better. I'm quickly gonna do that, and then we can gather to fit into the arm's eye of the bodice and put everything together. Let's also close the side seam by just putting right sides together of both of the sleeve side seams. And you want to be precise while matching up your elastic right here. So I'm gonna add a pin here, and then also for the hem, of course. So let's match that up. So, and then also overlock the seam. Okay, all of the sleeves are prepped and done, so I'm gonna go ahead and pin that onto the correct arm's eye. So I'm gonna match up the side seam and then obviously the 2 sleeve notches. So the one in the back matches up with the princess seam, that's why it's called princess seam notch. So just match these up, and then the one in the front matches up with the notch actually, and then obviously also the shoulder notch, which goes together with the seam. And with all of that now prepped, I'm gonna go ahead and pull on the bobbin thread of my gathering stitch to gather everything down to size. And with all of that pinned in place, I'm gonna go ahead and sew the sleeve in, and then I'm also going to overlock around the sleeve area, finishing all 3 parts of this basically at once. Let's quickly put the zipper in as you would usually do with lined garments. So I'm just gonna open the zipper up, put right sides together with the shell, making sure that the top of my zipper band, where, you know, the plastic stopper ends, so you can see it right here where it folds, you want to match that up with the actual fold line right here, like so. These need to be at the same height. Pin that in place and pin your zipper down all the way towards your zipper notch, which should be, according to the pattern, 30 centimeters below your waistline. Like for me, I have pretty long zipper already, but it doesn't quite meet my zipper notch. I'm just gonna go all the way down to here, and that should be fine as well since we have such a puffy skirt. And obviously, once I'm done sewing, transferring the zipper notch placement. So this is now, I would say, 7 centimeters higher than the actual zipper notch, which is totally fine as well. So let's use a zipper foot and put the zipper into the center back onto the shell. Okay, with that done, let's close the zipper. And I usually like to mark all of the seams and spots that are necessary to match up where the waist seam is. I'm gonna do that on the other side as well, so that I can perfectly match that up once I mirror the placement to the other side. Then up here, I also want to mark my fold line of the neck. And then of course also the spot where I stopped stitching. So like that. Let's open the zipper back up and place it onto the other side of the dress right here. Okay, and let's sew this side in as well. Okay, and once we close the zipper, everything should line up really nicely like so. Now we can also finish on the inside. And what we need to do now is to turn everything over. First off, though, I want to flip away that upper edge of the zipper, because now we need to fold our lining right on top here. And I'm gonna pin this all the way down until I reach the zipper notch. So we have also the waist seam in the lining. I'm gonna match that up with the waist seam in the shell. The in-between should match up already. And then the zipper notch also should match up like that. And I'm gonna use a one-sided zipper foot to stitch the lining onto the zipper band, onto the seam allowance here. So I'm gonna stitch a teeny tiny bit next to it, probably at like 5 millimeters or whatever, so that everything is fixed in place, but doesn't disturb the zipper while zipping up and stuff. So let's do that, and then we can copy the same thing to the other side. So with the zipper now done, it's just a matter of closing the remaining center back seam in both the shell and the lining. So I'm just gonna start from the bottom, matching up my hemline, and I'm gonna do both of them separately so that they, move independently from each other. I am going to stitch almost all the way up, probably gonna stop a centimeter before that, and since it is inside of the ruffles, nobody's ever gonna see that. Let's match the in-between up, and I also can go ahead and pin the lining skirt. Same thing here, match up the hem, and then about a centimeter below the zipper notch, I'm gonna stop stitching. So like that, let's go ahead and finish this dress. And that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I know this has been a long watch, but I hope you enjoyed nevertheless. I am super, super excited to show you the final outcome of the dress. It is so puffy, it is so flowy. I love it so, so much. I can also picture that in like a kind of mint green or kind of, more floral in that direction, because I think it'll fit the design of the dress very, very well. So can't wait for your guys' opinions on this dress. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you'll get notified every time that I post. I post every Sunday, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, you can check out all of my socials. Links to that are in the description down below. I'm doing short format content, so if that's something that you're interested in, please go ahead and check that out and give me a follow over there. The most direct way to support me is to head over to my Etsy store, where you can also find today's pattern as well via the direct link in the description down below. So please go ahead and check out my shop. I have so many patterns. I bet there is something for you as well. So thank you so much for considering supporting me that way. And also a special thank you to my channel members. You can get exclusive benefits through the link in the description down below. So thank you so much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next Sunday. Bye guys!